Remember a time when every new gadget promised to revolutionize our homes? When personal computers and game consoles were supposed to make life easier, cooler, more futuristic? Well, not everything lived up to the hype. Today, we're exploring 25 retro tech gadgets, from the 1900s to the end of the 20th century, that Americans tried, used, and then largely forgot. These devices were sold in homes across the country, but they failed to change the world. 1. Atari 1200 XL. Atari wanted the 1200 XL to be the ultimate home computer. It had 64K of memory, a nice keyboard, extra function keys, and even a built-in self-test. It looked sleek and modern, all for nearly $900 in 1983. But people weren't impressed. That price tag matched early IBM PCs and Apple IIs, which were seen as more reliable and compatible. To make matters worse, the 1200 XL couldn't run many of the old Atari 400 and 800 programs because the cartridge slot didn't match. Imagine paying top dollar, then discovering half your software collection is useless. It also had design issues, overheating electronics that made the machine heavy, hot, and power-hungry. Atari responded by releasing the cheaper 600 XL and 800 XL models, which were more compatible and better supported. By the end of 1983, the 1200 XL was discontinued, having sold only around 80,000 units. It became a cautionary tale. Impressive specs don't matter if the price is too high or the product breaks compatibility with your own ecosystem. 2. Fairchild Channel F. Back in 1976, the Channel F hit the U.S. market with a bold new idea: swap out built-in games with cartridges. It even introduced the first console pause button and had an 8-way digital joystick that felt high-tech at the time. Around 300,000 units were sold in America, enough to spark real interest. But that buzz faded quickly. Its game library was tiny, just about 24 titles, and most were slow-moving puzzle or card games that didn't match the excitement of arcade-style action. By the time Atari's VCS appeared in 1977 with fast-paced, visually engaging games, the Channel F began to look outdated. Prices dropped, shelves filled with VCS games, and families moved on. The true significance of the Channel F, though, wasn't in its sales. It was in what it started. Jerry Lawson, the lead engineer, designed a durable cartridge connector that could be inserted, removed, and used over and over without breaking. He also pushed for features like CPU-based graphics and pause functionality. His innovations set a new standard for gaming. Without them, today's swap-and-play console ecosystem may never have existed. 3. Atari 5200. Atari launched the 5200 in late 1982 as the next big console, promising better graphics and 4 controller ports. It sounded great, but it quickly came with a surprise. It couldn't play Atari 2600 games, which meant your old games were useless unless you bought extra hardware. Even then, compatibility was hit or miss. Its controllers were supposed to be advanced, analog joysticks and a number pad. But they didn't self-center, often felt imprecise, and many broke shortly after purchase. Players found them frustrating, and word spread fast. It didn't help that many launch titles were just remastered versions of old games, so it didn't feel fresh. By mid-1984, Atari quietly stopped selling the 5200. It sold about 1 million units, far behind the 20 million of the 2600. This misfire hurt Atari's reputation and contributed to the 1983 video game crash. It taught a hard lesson. Next-gen tools don't matter if they're unreliable, incompatible, or lagging in fresh content. 4. Vectrex. When the Vectrex arrived in 1982, it was unlike anything else. It had its own built-in vector screen, so graphics were crisp, glowing lines, not fuzzy dots. But it also came at a strange time. The video game crash was right around the corner, and stores were already getting flooded with failed consoles. Many Vectrex units ended up discounted or hidden in backrooms. The system was powerful, but fragile. Its inside parts had high voltages, and hardware issues were common, especially with the controls and power supply. Fixing it often meant sending it to a specialized repair shop. This fragility and high price limited its reach. Most Americans simply couldn't justify it. Despite that, the vivid graphics and vector visuals earned it a cult following. But by 1984, Vectrex was discontinued. Today, it's prized by collectors and remembered as a unique system that showed what could happen when you aim for quality, but the timing just isn't right. 5. Atari Lynx. The Atari Lynx was the first handheld game console with a full-color screen, and at launch, it felt like something from the future. It had impressive hardware for the time, sprite scaling, multiplayer support, and even the ability to flip the display for left-handed players. On paper, it outclassed the competition, but in practice, it struggled. The Lynx was bulky, heavy, and drained 6 AA batteries in just a few hours. It was also expensive, making it a tough sell for American families. Worse, its game library never really took off. While Nintendo's Game Boy was black and white, it had hit titles like Tetris and Super Mario Land, and much longer battery life. Kids didn't care about technical specs, they cared about fun and convenience, and on that front, the Game Boy won by a mile. The Lynx might have been first with color, but it finished a distant second in the race. 6. Apple Bandai Pippen. Apple teamed up with Bandai to create the Pippen, a mix between a game console and a stripped-down Macintosh computer. It was meant to bring the internet and multimedia into living rooms across America. But with a $600 price tag and no standout games, it struggled right out of the gate. Most families didn't know if it was a gaming system or a home computer. Developers weren't sure either, and as a result, very few titles were released. Without a clear audience or identity, the Pippen quietly disappeared from shelves. The strangest part is that it came from Apple, a company known today for sleek, successful products. So it tried to reach everyone and ended up reaching no one. Even Apple seemed unsure of what they had created, and they moved on quickly without looking back. It was a product too advanced for its time, yet too confused to succeed in any era. In the end, it became one of Apple's rare failures, buried deep in the company's forgotten past. 7. Nintendo Virtual Boy. Nintendo tried something bold with the Virtual Boy, a 3D gaming machine that looked more like a tabletop headset than a console. It used red and black visuals to create depth, and early ads made it seem like the future of video games. But players quickly learned it was uncomfortable to use. You had to lean into it like a microscope, and the graphics gave many users headaches or eye strain. Parents were hesitant, kids lost interest, and sales never took off. The red-only screen felt more like a tech demo than something you'd play for hours. Today, the Virtual Boy is a collector's item, a reminder that even gaming giants can trip when they try to sprint too far ahead of their time. It was bold, but not fun, and that's where it lost the crowd. In the end, it proved that innovation needs more than novelty, it needs joy. And for all of Nintendo's creativity, this was one experiment American gamers were happy to forget. 8. 3DO Console. The 3DO was pitched as a premium multimedia system that played games, music, and video, all in one box. It had better graphics than most consoles at the time and support from big names like EA. But there was one major problem: the price. At launch, it cost around $700, far more than most families were willing to spend. The early lineup was small, and there were no must-have titles to justify the cost. It launched in between console generations, and when Sony's PlayStation and Sega Saturn arrived soon after, the 3DO felt like old news. It's a case where better hardware didn't matter, because the price was too high, the software was too weak, and the market was already moving on. It aimed for the future but forgot to win the present. For all its power, it lacked the one thing that sells systems: excitement. In the end, the 3DO proved that being advanced means nothing if no one wants to play it. 9. Commodore CDTV. The CDTV was Commodore's attempt to bring CD-ROM multimedia into the living room before most people had even heard of it. It looked like a sleek piece of stereo equipment, not a computer, and was built on the same tech as the Amiga 500. Commodore hoped Americans would buy it for games, educational programs, music, and video content all in one. But the $1,000 price tag made it an instant stretch for most families, especially when it didn't come with a monitor or keyboard. Even worse, the software library was tiny and uninspiring, mostly dull educational discs or glorified CD slideshows. People who wanted games went with consoles. People who wanted computers went with PCs. CDTV was stuck in between, with no real purpose. It felt like tech for tech's sake. In the end, Americans just didn't see the point, and the CDTV faded before it ever really had a chance. Today, it's remembered more as a footnote in multimedia history than a device anyone actually used. 10. Atari Jaguar. The Atari Jaguar was promoted as the first 64-bit gaming console, a claim that sounded impressive in stores across America. It was supposed to leapfrog past the competition with raw power and futuristic design. But under the hood, the Jaguar was hard to program for, and most developers struggled to get decent games out of it. As a result, its game library stayed small, and what did come out often looked worse than what Sega or Nintendo had. The controller was clunky, with a full number pad that few games actually used. The system didn't play CD games unless you bought an awkward, pricey add-on. And Atari, already losing steam, didn't have the marketing muscle to keep it alive. American gamers gave it a chance, but quickly turned back to systems that actually delivered. For all its big promises, the Jaguar ended up as Atari's last breath in the console world, and it went out with a whimper, not a roar. 11. Laserdisc. Before DVDs or Blu-rays, there was the Laserdisc, a giant, shiny platter that promised movie theater quality in your living room. It looked like a futuristic vinyl record, and it really did offer better video and sound than VHS. But there were some serious problems. The discs were huge, expensive, and couldn't store an entire movie on one side, so you had to get up halfway and flip it over. Laserdisc players also cost a lot, sometimes hundreds more than a VCR, and while collectors and cinephiles loved the quality, the average American just wanted something cheap and easy to use. VHS won the format war, not because it was better, but because it was good enough and way more practical. Laserdisc stayed alive in schools, film classrooms, and hobbyist circles, but for most American households, it was the high-tech movie dream that never caught on. It was admired, but never adopted. In the end, it became more of a conversation piece than a common fixture in American homes. 12. Betamax. Sony's Betamax entered the American market as a sleek, high-quality videocassette format that boasted better image and sound than its rival, VHS. It looked and felt like the future of home video, and for a short while, it had a head start. But there was one big problem. Betamax tapes didn't record as long as VHS tapes. Consumers cared more about recording full movies and TV shows than getting slightly sharper picture quality. VHS also had wider support. Multiple companies licensed the format and flooded the market with affordable players and blank tapes. Meanwhile, Sony kept Betamax proprietary, limiting availability and driving up cost. It became a battle of openness versus control, and VHS crushed it in the long run. Betamax held on in some professional industries, but it vanished from American living rooms. Today, it's remembered as a cautionary tale that better tech doesn't always win, especially if it doesn't listen to what people actually want. In hindsight, it wasn't just a tech loss, it was a lesson in the power of convenience and accessibility. 13. Polavision. Polaroid's Polavision system was supposed to bring instant video to the home, the same way their cameras gave instant photos. It came with a special camcorder and tiny cartridges you could record on and play back right away. At a glance, it sounded like magic. Watch your home movies instantly, no waiting for film development. But Polavision had major flaws. The video quality was poor, It only played in black and white, and the clips were painfully short, about 2.5 minutes per cartridge. Worse, it could only be viewed on Polaroid's dedicated tabletop viewer, which wasn't cheap. There was no easy way to share or preserve recordings, and just as it launched, VHS camcorders hit the market. Polavision was obsolete almost the moment it arrived. It was one of those inventions that felt incredible in theory, but in practice was just too limited and too late. Americans were ready for home video, but not like this. Today, it's mostly remembered as a bold misstep from a company that usually knew exactly how to capture the moment. 14. Macintosh Portable. Before sleek MacBooks and iPads, there was the Macintosh Portable, Apple's first attempt at bringing a personal computer on the go. It had a crisp display, long battery life for its time, and even a trackball. But here's the catch. It weighed nearly 16 pounds and cost over $6,000. Calling it portable was generous. You needed serious arm strength just to carry it. The battery alone was heavy and had a habit of failing, which meant that if the battery died, the whole system often wouldn't even turn on, even when plugged in. And unlike other laptops that were starting to emerge, this one felt more like a desktop with a handle. It didn't catch on with the American public, who were looking for true mobility, not a briefcase-sized machine that needed its own seat on the bus. The Macintosh Portable showed where laptops might go, but reminded everyone how far they still had to come. In the end, it was a powerful idea trapped inside a bulky body that most Americans simply couldn't carry into the future. 15. Apple Newton Message Pad. Before the iPhone or iPad, there was the Apple Newton, a chunky gray handheld that aimed to be your digital assistant. It let you take notes, store contacts, and even recognize handwriting. But that last part, handwriting recognition, was its downfall. The software often misread even the neatest script, turning grocery lists into gibberish and notes into nonsense. It became a punchline in late-night TV and cartoons. Despite its flaws, it was ahead of its time. It had touch input, apps, and syncing features long before they became common. But Americans weren't ready to carry a $700 digital notebook that couldn't reliably read what they wrote. The Newton quietly faded, but its DNA lived on in later Apple products. It proved that a great idea still needs great execution and timing. In the end, the Newton wasn't a failure in vision, just in delivery. It walked so future Apple devices could run. And today, it's looked back on not as a flop, but as the first spark of something bigger. 16. Endgage. Nokia's Endgage was meant to be the future, a handheld gaming console and mobile phone in one. It promised American users the best of both worlds: make a call, then jump right into a 3D game. But from day one, it was awkward. You had to remove the battery just to change game cartridges, and talking on it meant holding the device sideways against your face, earning it the nickname Taco Phone. Games were limited, the screen was tiny, and it just didn't do either job particularly well. Gamers stuck with Game Boys, and phone users didn't need a bulky hybrid. Nokia tried to relaunch it with better design, but the damage was already done. The Endgage became a symbol of trying to do too much, too soon. In the U.S., it never found its audience. It showed that just because something can combine two ideas doesn't mean it should. In hindsight, the Endgage was a glimpse at the smartphone era, just too clunky and too early to matter. It failed to impress either crowd and got lost in a market that wasn't quite ready for convergence. 17. Hyperscan. The Hyperscan was Mattel's strange attempt at combining video games with RFID technology aimed at American kids in the mid-2000s. The idea was creative. Scan cards to unlock characters or moves, blending physical toys with digital games. But the execution was rough. The console was cheaply made, the graphics were outdated, and the load times were painfully slow. Kids who were used to fast-paced action didn't have the patience for it. The card-scanning gimmick got old fast, and only a handful of games were ever released. On top of that, the games weren't much fun to begin with. Parents who bought into the concept quickly realized it was more frustration than fun. The Hyperscan disappeared from store shelves almost as quickly as it arrived. Today, it's remembered more for what it tried to be than what it actually was, a forgotten footnote in gaming's long history of failed experiments. It aimed to bridge toys and tech, but only managed to highlight the gap between concept and execution. 18. QCAT. The QCAT was a small barcode scanner sent for free to American households in the early 2000s. Its goal? Let people scan barcodes from magazines or product packages to instantly visit related websites on their computer. It sounded futuristic, bridging the gap between print and digital. But there was a big problem. Nobody wanted to do that. Typing a URL was easier than digging out a wired scanner, and most people didn't see the point. To make matters worse, the QCAT tracked users' scans, raising privacy concerns that scared off even the curious. It became an object of ridicule online, with tech blogs calling it one of the worst inventions ever. Retailers and magazines that partnered with the device quietly dropped support. In the end, it tried to solve a problem that didn't exist, and created new ones along the way. The QCAT was a glimpse at how not to mix convenience with technology. Today, it's remembered as a quirky relic of the dot-com era's overconfidence. 19. Robot Arcade Cabinet. Long before 3D gaming became mainstream, the Robot Arcade machine dared to try something entirely new. Released in select U.S. arcades, it was the first game to use fully 3D polygon graphics, way ahead of its time. But the gameplay was confusing, the design was strange, and the difficulty curve frustrated most players. Gamers, used to simple shooters and platformers, didn't know what to make of it. Operators pulled the machines early because they just didn't make money. Only about 1,000 cabinets were ever produced, making it both rare and forgotten. But tech-wise, it was a milestone that predicted the future of gaming. Sadly, innovation alone couldn't save it from poor reception. American arcades just weren't ready for a leap that big. Today, collectors admire it not for its fun, but for its ambition. It's a reminder that being first doesn't always mean being successful. Still, in hindsight, it planted the seeds for the 3D gaming revolution that would eventually take over. 20. Sundance Arcade Machine. The Sundance arcade game was a bold experiment from Cinematronics in the late 70s, using bright vector graphics and twin-button gameplay. The idea was to bounce light beams across the screen using two paddles, but the controls were clunky, the visuals disorienting, and the learning curve steep. Most players gave up after one or two tries. It looked cool, but it wasn't fun. To make matters worse, the machines broke down often, and arcade owners hated dealing with the fragile hardware. Very few were made, and even fewer survived. While it tried to push the boundaries of what arcade games could look like, it failed to capture the magic that made other games addictive. American players simply weren't drawn to abstract puzzles when Pac-Man and Galaga were lighting up the room. Sundance now lives on as a rare collectible, an oddball experiment that aimed high but missed the mark. It stands as proof that visual innovation means little without a gameplay experience people actually enjoy. 21. Nuon DVD Chipset. The Nuon was supposed to be the future of DVD players in America. Built into a handful of DVD players from brands like Toshiba and Samsung, it added video game support, internet features, and advanced playback controls. The idea was to turn your DVD player into a full entertainment hub, but hardly anyone knew it existed. There were barely any games, and the marketing was almost non-existent. The few titles released, like a Nuon version of Tempest 3000, never made a dent with mainstream audiences. Retailers didn't understand how to sell it, and buyers were confused about why one DVD player cost so much more than another. Americans just wanted to watch movies, not play buggy, unknown games. In trying to be everything, the Nuon ended up being nothing. It's now a favorite among obscure tech collectors, but most people never even saw one in the wild. It was an ambitious idea that faded before it ever had a chance to compete. 22. Tomtronic 3D. In the early 80s, Tomy released a strange, futuristic-looking toy that promised 3D gaming on the go. The Tomtronic 3D looked like a pair of binoculars, and when held up to your face, it used mirrors and lights to simulate a 3D experience. It was marketed across the U.S. and sold in toy aisles, drawing curious kids and nostalgic adults alike. But the gameplay was incredibly basic, and the 3D illusion wore off fast. You could only play in bright light, and the games, like Shark Attack or Sky Fighters, felt more like electronic viewfinders than real video games. Kids got bored quickly, and parents saw it as more gimmick than substance. It looked cool in commercials, but didn't hold attention beyond the first day. While it sold decently during its release window, it disappeared as soon as better handheld options arrived. Today, it's remembered more for its wild design than its actual play value, a retro curiosity that proved flash can't replace fun. 23. Sinclair C5. The Sinclair C5 was a battery-powered trike that looked like it rolled out of a sci-fi cartoon. Originally launched in the UK, a few units and prototypes trickled into American tech expos and magazines, sparking brief interest in a low-cost electric personal vehicle. It was small, low to the ground, and barely went 15 miles per hour. In theory, it was eco-friendly and affordable. In reality, it was terrifying to drive alongside real cars. Americans weren't sold on a vehicle that made you look like a target in traffic. There was no weather protection, no real safety features, and you looked like a grown adult riding a toy. The idea of electric transport was ahead of its time, but the design was too strange and impractical to catch on. While the C5 is often mocked today, it did spark early conversations around electric vehicles. Still, it wasn't the car of the future. It was more like a warning sign of how not to build one. 24. Vacuum Beauty Helmet. In mid-century America, beauty salons were filled with strange machines, and one of the oddest was the vacuum beauty helmet. It looked like something from a sci-fi movie, a large plastic dome that covered the head, hooked to a loud humming vacuum motor. The idea was that it would suck the moisture and impurities from your scalp, improving circulation and giving you shinier, healthier hair. Housewives across the country were told it was the future of home beauty, but the results were inconsistent at best and uncomfortable at worst. Some users reported hair breakage or overheating, while others found it too noisy and awkward to use regularly. It was marketed as futuristic self-care, but ended up feeling like torture in a space bubble. Most women quickly went back to traditional hair dryers or just visited the salon. Today, it's remembered as a strange blend of fashion, tech, and 1950s optimism gone off the rails. The only thing it truly improved was how weird beauty gadgets could get. 25. 3D specs or auto-stereograms. Before 3D glasses were common in theaters, American companies tried to bring stereoscopic tech to homes with products like 3D specs and auto-stereogram posters. These glasses or images promised a 3D experience without special screens. Just put on the paper lenses or stare at the patterns, and a hidden image would pop out. The idea caught fire in magazines, cereal boxes, and mall kiosks. But in reality, the effect didn't work for everyone, and many people just saw blurry nonsense. Kids complained of headaches, and adults often got frustrated trying to see the illusion. Despite the initial craze, it didn't take long for the gimmick to wear thin. The posters ended up collecting dust, and the glasses found their way to junk drawers across the country. It was a short-lived fad that burned bright but fizzled fast. Still, for a moment in time, it felt like magic you could hang on your wall, until you realized not everyone could see the magic at all. What do all these inventions have in common? Big dreams, bold ideas, and a country that just wasn't quite ready or willing to take the leap. Some of these gadgets were ahead of their time, others were just plain strange, but each one left its mark, however faint, on the story of American innovation. They remind us of an era when technology felt like magic, when the future was something you could buy from a catalog, and when even failure was a sign that someone dared to try. If you remember any of these, or owned one yourself, we'd love to hear your story in the comments below. What retro product did you think would change everything, but didn't? If this trip down memory lane sparked a memory or gave you a smile, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to The America We Remember. And don't forget to check out our other videos for more forgotten fads, failed inventions, and nostalgic treasures from the past. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.